Hello, good morning, good afternoon, happy new year. So glad to be here with you all on the other side of 2020. Take a fresh breath. It feels good to be here. Great to be back. As always, thank you to Fritz and the team for putting these together. And today's session is all about the retail transformation, breaking on through to the other side, really channeling our inner Jim Morrison with today's title. But who better to recap an unprecedented 2020 and look forward via her magical crystal ball, I made fun of her before, than the real-time celebrity in the retail world, Jennifer DiPasquale. So for those unaware, Jennifer is a publisher and pioneer in the retail marketing world. She's worked with Total Retail and the Target Marketing Group for over 18 years. You likely bumped into Jennifer at one of Total Retail's very successful roundtable events. And she is the president and co-founder of the Women in Retail Leadership Circle, an exclusive community of women executives at leading retailers and brands built by women, made for women, and designed to champion women. So as such, Jennifer has a pulse on the retail world unlike anyone else that I know personally, and is aware of what key executives are thinking as she interacts and consults with them constantly through Total Retail and the Women in Retail Leadership Circle. As such, it's my pleasure to have Jennifer join me today. Jen, can you hear me?
Hi, Terrence. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too. Good to be back and nice to talk to you again. I know we've bumped into each other a few times in the past. This is a real pleasure for us. You've been so busy. I usually can't tie you down at your events, but nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, of course. What an intro.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a little better, with the outfits, the intros, and the all-around professionalism.
I love it.
So, Jen, before we dive in, I'm always interested to learn a bit about your, to put it simply, COVID experience. How have you avoided going crazy yourself during this time of restricted living? How have you been learning, staying engaged, or challenging yourself?
Yeah. I mean, good question. Well, we have 3 kids, so we've been, busy with them, trying to figure out and navigate the whole school, back in school, home school, all of that fun stuff. But I'm a voracious reader, so a lot of what we do at Women in Retail is around professional development. So I've just been like gobbling up books that I haven't gotten to, and podcasts. I'm a huge podcast junkie, so. The most recent book I read was The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. I don't know if you follow her. She's in the professional development world, but she's a total badass. And it's actually a tool to help you through what they call push moments, like, whether it's starting exercise or picking up the phone and having a hard conversation, or, working on a research project that you've been putting off, whatever the case is. So highly recommend that one for sure.
Awesome. I will look up into that. I'm happy it's not about just the 5-second food rule. That's where my brain went.
I think that's a different book.
Yeah. And so, I have this collection behind me. I mentioned constantly I haven't gotten to all of them. But frankly, I was interested. Have you heard of Stuff You Should Know?
No, I don't know that one.
It's unrelated to work, non-business, but it's a podcast I've begun to really like recently. It's a great way of just learning about random different topics. I think last week's was focused on otters, for example, and they just tackle a new topic every week. But it's been my companion on runs while I try and get back into shape.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's when I listen to my podcast too. Yeah, I'm totally down. I just wrote it down. Awesome.
Cool. So, Jennifer, tell me about a memorable experience you've had as a consumer.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all had memorable, good and bad, right? As a consumer. I'll give you 2 examples. So as we were just chatting offline, my kids I have 3 kids, and they're all really good skiers. So in the middle of COVID over the summer, we were like, you know what, we're going to plan a ski trip, right? So we booked through United, and we were all excited, to go this month. Well, of course, that's not happening. And so, this isn't a retail story, but retailers can apply it. So my experience with United was phenomenal. So I reached out to them. You get on those really long wait calls, and
Yes.
no one has time for that nonsense. So when I was
Yeah.
canceling the trip, they gave me the option of text, and I jumped on it, and literally, like, within a matter of hours, our flights were refunded. They gave me the option of either, refunding it or using the credit for the next year, kind of a thing. But it was so
Right.
seamless via text. I didn't have to waste my time. They didn't have to waste their time. They gave me options. And I thought, oh my gosh, retailers can totally take, some notes on this,
No.
because as they go into return season, that's going to be,
Yeah.
the next challenge for them.
You brought up an airline, and I immediately winced and got worried about what could be said, because you hear just horror stories, so that's a nice
Yeah.
thing to hear.
Yeah, no, it was a really good experience. And I'll give you another one, from the retail side of things. So, and I don't know if you know them, this retailer, it's called Two Blind Brothers,
No.
but they were brothers who were born with a degenerative blindness disease. And my mom has macular degeneration, so it's near and dear to my heart. So they did this really cool campaign, which I've never seen before, where, and their names are Brian and Bradford Manning, by the way, Two Blind Brothers. And they did this Shop Blind challenge, where you would literally go on and you didn't know the product that you were buying. They had levels like $39 or $79 or whatever the case is, and you would shop blind and you didn't know the products you were getting. And I thought that was, like, from a marketing standpoint, I'd never seen anything like it. Such a cool experience. And so, like a lot of retailers, they had some challenges with their supply chain, and they handled it so beautifully. Like, they were, from a consumer perspective, I could see how hard they were working behind the scenes to, they kept over communicating to us. So, they didn't know if we were going to get the products by Christmas or not. Right.
Yeah.
And it turns out they did not, but they over communicated it. So, and you could feel the passion behind the emails that you were getting.
Yeah.
So as a consumer, it wasn't upsetting. Everybody had to be empathetic in the moment. And they did such a beautiful job with comms. Like, I was so impressed with them. So.
Yeah, and I love that, because, I always stress with our clients, you over communicate whenever possible, right?
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to delivery, the most frustrated consumer is the one who doesn't know what's going on.
So true.
I've picked on a few retailers in the past, but the home improvement industry exploded in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Everyone was stuck at home, and with that, the supply chain was really tested. And I won't mention the brand by name, but I ordered some Adirondack chairs, I think, in April, excited to have something in the backyard and a new patio. And I think they arrived in September, and I almost never heard about where they were.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing, right? Like, if people are taken by surprise, that's when they, react poorly, and it's not building loyalty to your brand and, the whole 9 yards. So.
Yeah. And have you learned anything about yourself as a consumer during this whole craze, in this madness stretch?
I mean, I think I'm hoping, along with so many consumers, I've been trying just to support small businesses. I feel for all of these guys who are going through so many transitions and trying to stay afloat. So I think there's going to be a return to, continuing to support small businesses.
Right.
And we're even teaching our kids, like, hey, we're going to shop local. We've got to keep these guys open.
Right.
That kind of thing. So I'm hoping that's, one of the silver linings coming out of 2020.
Yeah, and let's get to that. So no more hiding your secrets, Jen. We're going to bring them right out to the table. And as I mentioned in the introduction today, you are in an excellent position, because your work is with these executives and with these retail leaders day in and day out, learning their feedback, their concerns, their excitements, and what they're working on. Do you have kind of a high-level overview and summary of some 2020 insights, pain points, and things we got out of your roundtables?
Yeah, for sure. We have the privilege of chatting with a lot of these retailers, at the C-suite level. So we know all the pain points, and there's been a lot of challenges, as you can imagine. Obviously they've dealt with temporary store closures, some are still closed, obviously. And how do they replace for what is, many traditional brick and mortar retailers, 85 to 90% of their revenue, right?
Right.
It's a huge challenge. And I'll give you an example of some folks who have pivoted really well, so that other people can learn from them. One retailer is Kendra Scott, the jewelry retailer. And, when stores closed, they converted their stores to fulfillment centers, to handle the influx of the e-commerce sales coming in, and they pivoted that way, and they did a beautiful job of that pretty early on. Best Buy is another great example. They pivoted really early on in the middle of Q1 to curbside only sales. And I think they retained something like 81% of their sales from the previous year without having anyone step foot in their stores.
Right.
So, that's huge, when you think about it. Obviously, the retailers have had huge supply chain issues, which we talked about. They had to ramp up their supply chains to handle the surge in online ordering. And yet there's, as you mentioned, there's so many pockets of retail that have done really well, and they've kind of had the opposite, this exponential growth, that they've had to deal with, like Madison Reed. I interviewed Amy Urad, who's the CEO of Madison Reed this summer, and they're, I think they 10x'd in 9 months their hair color, right? And so in order to keep the business going, they converted half of their operations in Italy to produce hand sanitizer to stay afloat and keep the business open. They took all of their Color Bar employees, which were in store, and moved them to their customer service, team to handle calls.
Yeah.
So, these retailers have just pivoted unbelievably so, in all the turmoil. A lot of these retailers, as they've had to create, safety policies and procedures, not only for their employees, but, obviously the consumer. We actually did a safety index report. You can find it on mytotalretail.com, where we sort of did an analysis of, which retailers were doing really well in store. I think we had about 29 criteria or so that we were measuring them against. Best Buy took the top spot. They did a really, really good job of, cleaning high traffic areas, which was one of our major criteria. And then Ulta took the second spot, I believe. And, for beauty, it was really tough because, everything is testing makeup, right? Like that's part of the experiential in-store experience. So they shut that down, and they, took all the testing products off, and did a really good job of directing people in store with arrows and signage and things in store. So again, like having to, ramp that up over the course of the year has been a huge challenge for these guys.
Yeah, and speaking of your Women in Retail Leadership Circle, Corey Barry, the CEO of Best Buy, she's done some, like you've mentioned, some pretty impressive work.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Right.
She's amazing. We had her speak at our live event at our Women in Retail Leadership Summit last year. And it was just when she was announced to CEO and her team was there.
Right.
And you could tell what a phenomenal leader she was just from the reaction of her team.
That's nice.
And they were so excited for her and everything. So she's just been a phenomenal force and driving leader in retail for sure.
Wonderful. So silver linings, you said it before. What are we looking at for silver linings for 2021?
Honestly, there have been, I know retailers have been challenged, but there have been so many silver linings that have come from last year. When you look at the big picture, obviously there's the digital acceleration, right? You've basically crammed, 5 to 10 years of digital progress into 9 months, right? You've seen these retailers testing new communication platforms, live chat, video, concierge service, personal shopping, SMS. So there's so many new communication platforms that they're testing.
Yeah.
Obviously there's advances in their supply chain services, There's advances in BOPUS and curbside and all of that fun stuff. So the digital acceleration is huge, right? It has really advanced them, like I said, 5 to 10 years ahead of the curve. One of my favorite silver linings, I have to say, is all of the surge in purpose-driven retailers.
Yeah.
I talked about Two Blind Brothers. Tom's and Warby Parker were really on the forefront of the buy one, donate one type of model.
Yep.
But now you've seen in COVID so many retailers stepping up and, donating and giving back. I mean, you have Allbirds and DSW donating shoes to frontline workers.
Yeah.
Somersault is donating a portion of every sale to No Kid Hungry. You have, folks like North Face and Body Shop donating product. I think North Face donates gloves to essential workers, and Body Shop is donating products to shelters and things like that. So I think, from a consumer standpoint, it's been really interesting to watch the retailers sort of take a step back and go, hey, who are we as a company? What do we want to support? And, what do we believe in? And so that's been a really interesting finding, I think, and silver lining from 2020, to have all these retailers step up to the plate and just start giving back.
Yeah, I love one of my favorite brands to talk about, mostly for my own personal anecdotes, is Crocs.
Yeah.
And mostly because my dad, I swear, as soon as Crocs came out when I was a kid, I think it was 2002 or something like that. They've been around a little while.
Yeah.
Don't test me on that year. I'm probably wrong. But he was the first person I saw in a pair of Crocs, and he was raving about them. And because he was so obsessed with them, I told myself I'm never going to be caught dead in a pair of Crocs around my dad.
Right.
But then sure enough, I'm one of 5 boys. All of us had Crocs within a year or two. And on this topic, I saw Crocs did something like they donated almost 1 million pairs of shoes to healthcare workers and things like that too. So it is really nice to see.
It's so cool. And that's another, I think, too, is a good point because, well, first of all, your mom is a saint. One of 5 boys. Yeah. 5 boys. Oh, my God.
She's tired.
She's tired. She's my hero. But I think one of the silver linings to come is all of the partnerships, right, that, these retailers have created with other retailers, but then in the outside world, too, outside of retail. So, you'll see, like, there's the big ones, Kohl's and Sephora and Target and Ulta, and they've taken, footprints within those big box stores, which is, super cool to see. But then you'll see partnerships like Dick's Sporting Goods and Instacart, testing same day delivery and things like that. And I think you're going to also see, as travel starts to come back, I think you'll start to see more of these retailers partnering with, travel. And getting ahead of that curve too. So I think partnerships, is another silver lining that's come from last year for sure.
Now, talk to me a little bit because I'm being as respectful as I can of your time. Jennifer, as everyone knows, is not easy to get around, and we want to keep her here as long as we can. But talk to me a little bit about connectivity. You mentioned this in previous calls. As a differentiating factor. What are you getting at with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my point in connectivity is that, retailers are going to have to find a way to connect to the consumer. And they're also going to have to make, a seamless approach across all their channels, right? Consumers' mindsets have changed. I think we've seen that in COVID, as we talked about, I think they really want to support brands they believe in, support brands that are, putting good in the world and doing good, or, maybe have the same political values that they have as well. Like you've seen a mindset shift for sure on the consumer side. So I think it's extremely important for the retailers to, figure out what that is. Who are they in the moment? What is their messaging that they want to put out, and who are they serving? And, is it okay if they lose, some of their longstanding followers and build loyalty with other consumers?
Right.
I think they're having sort of that, come to Jesus moment.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to cut you off. I know we were talking about these new initiatives as it pertains to profit for purpose. Was there anything else that you wanted to add on that as well?
I think it's just, I think I think for predictions, you'll continue to see that evolving,
Okay.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a million different retailers, sort of figuring out how they want to donate and give back in this
Right.
time and what they want to do moving forward. So, I think as a consumer too, you want to shop responsibly and shop with who you believe in and, whatever the case is and whatever the cause is, I think, do your research from a consumer standpoint too. And retailers, are cognizant of that and they'll, be continuing to give back. And you're going to see a lot more of these, purpose-driven retailers coming on the scene too.
Yeah, and it's I brought it up again because it's one of my favorite topics. This brand saliency and the emotion and that connectivity. I mean, everything that we're talking about is connected as well, because that experience and that sort of drive to interact with a particular brand because of like you mentioned, their political values, their sustainability, things like that is super fascinating. And I think, frankly, this is my limited exposure opinion. This is a big opportunity for a lot of brands today who are looking to capture additional market and who are looking to, excite maybe a demographic that traditionally isn't their type of customer.
Yep, that's exactly it. It's opportunity for them for sure. Yeah. To step out of their comfort zone of who their current customer is and draw in new customers.
Yeah. Jennifer, do you have anything else that you think looking forward to 2021 is important for brands? And this is nothing here is scripted, as you guys can all tell. But do you have anything that you think looking forward brands should be aware of or a prediction for the year?
I mean, there's a lot of predictions, right? I think you're going to continue to see online shopping just evolve even more so, and the sophistication, evolve even more so. I think customer service is huge, as we talked about in this call, and it builds loyalty and builds new customers. And, I think you have, for the retailers, they have to give people an experience that they're not getting elsewhere, right? So it's all about the customer and keeping your eye on the ball there. I think, as stores start to open up, you'll continue to see evolutions in experiential retail in store. And, what does that mean? What does that look like, for your consumer?
Right.
And constantly taking that pulse, what do they want? Don't be making decisions, in a box where you're not tapping your consumer constantly and asking them what they want. How do they want to be served in store? What are some unique experiences that you can drive? We've obviously talked about purpose-driven retail as a huge component moving forward. And I also think there's going to be more regional opportunities. I mean, to get back to the connectivity, I think community, the sense of community and the importance of local is going to continue. Right. So, how can you be part of that? And how can you regionally drive your retail stores, to be part of the community and engage the community that way?
No, it's fascinating. It's a good point. And I also loved, I've mentioned, I think in episodes in the past, your consumer looks at you as one single organism. And you've mentioned seamlessness is important too, and this omnichannel presence. And if it feels disjointed and broken, that's obviously something to address too.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And that's what they're experiencing too, right? If it feels that way, that's what the consumer's experiencing.
I can only imagine the fear and the cold chill down the spine of the retailers who didn't have the digital presence they were hoping for when this suddenly everyone was on their couch, on their mobile phone, looking at their digital presence.
Yeah. Yep. So. And depending on the size of the retailer too, it was easier to scale. If you're an SMB, A lot of them ramped up super quickly online. They had never been, online before, and they were able to do that. It's the larger the company, the more challenging the platforms and e-commerce challenges. But I'm truly amazed at how the industry has been able to pivot and launch in this time. I mean, it's just, it's amazing to me, and I'm so proud to champion the retailers and see what they have next.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. This is a pleasure. And it's always a pleasure to work with your team. You're an extremely bright group, and I love the innovative work and the consulting and the total retail roundtables. It's been a pleasure, every engagement we've had with you guys. So thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was great. Have a great quarter.
We'll be in touch. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate it. And so everyone who's with us still, thank you for your time. Join us next week for our conversation with Jean Bliss. She's a 4-time best-selling author on customer experience, keynote speaker, and host of the Chief Customer Office Human Duct Tape Show. There, I didn't want to mess that up, on iTunes, amongst many other impressive things that she does. And it's at a new time next week, 3 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week.